the first two videos, go ahead and click on these videos that are popping up right now, these cards, and watch them, and then come back and so that you can get more examples on simplifying rational expressions. Now, for this particular video, or for this particular problems, I should say, what we're going to do is we're going to be factoring out a lot, and we're going to be using the greatest common factor. Greatest common factor, okay? That's not a very good C. Let's see, this is giving me a little bit of trouble. Okay. The greatest common factor, and also this equation over here, b minus a is equal to -1 times a minus b. That's actually going to be quite useful. So let's go ahead and jump into the first problem. Make sure you write this down, this equation that I talked to you about early, the one that is in red, so that you can use it for later parts of this problem. So let's go over number one. This is what we have. Okay, we have 6 minus 3x divided by x squared minus 5x plus 6. So what we want to learn here is, or what we want to do here is make this in the simplest form. We want to simplify it. Remember when you will have something like, say, a fraction 6 divided by 9, 6 divided by 9, and you will say, well, the simplest form of this fraction is actually 2 over 3. And well, what you did here, you will just divide by 3, or let me write it in a different way. This is what you will do. Okay, what you will do was something like this. Let me erase this. You will say, well, let me find some factors of 6, and some factors of 6 is 2 and 3, right? 2 times 3 is 6, and some factors of 9 is 3 times 3, right? Well, and then you will say, well, what can I cancel out? Well, this is the same thing as 2 over 3 times 3 divided by 3. And well, 3 divided by 3 is just 1, so this is 2 over 3 times 1, and you're left with 2 over 3. And that is how you will get this simplest fraction, okay? Or this fraction in the simplest form. That's how you go from this 6 over 9 to this 2 divided by 3. Well, we're going to do pretty much the same thing here. We're going to factor this out, okay? And then we're going to make it in the simplest form. We're trying to see what can we cancel out. What are the factors that we can that will cancel each other out? So let's start with the numerator. 6 divided by 3x. 6 minus 3x. The greatest factor of 6 minus 3x, that will just be 2. Sorry, not 2. 3. 3 will be the greatest factor. Okay, so if I factor out a 3, I'm left with 2 minus x. And on the denominator, this x minus 5x plus 6. In order to factor this, I'm going to use the x method. Okay, and I'm going to write down this 6 here, this -5 on the bottom. And the question is, what are two values that when I multiply them give me 6, but when I add them give me -5? And well, that will be -2 and -3. So check this out. The factors for x squared minus 5x plus 6 will be x minus 2 times x minus 3. Now notice that this doesn't really, it looks like we don't have any factors from x minus 3 and x squared minus 5x plus 6 that we can cancel out. But if we focus on the numerator, we will notice that we can play around with this a little bit, okay? Now remember that we had this thing at the beginning, that if we have b minus a if we had b minus a, that's equal to -1 times a minus b. We can use this to play around with these numbers over here. So you see how we have, let's call this b, let's call this a. Let's change it to this a minus b here. So if I multiply if I factor out, I guess, a -1, -1 times 3 times, let's change it, x minus 2 divided by x minus 2 times x minus 3. Well, now notice how I do have some common factors, this x minus 2, that will cancel. They will cancel each other out, or they will reduce to 1. So I am left with -3 divided by x minus 3. And now, my friends, this will be in the simplest form. Now let's go ahead and work on number 2. Number 2, it's very similar. The approach that we will use is actually quite similar. Let me just move this. Okay. Okay, this is actually +2 minus 3. All right, so let's focus on the greatest common factor. Let's start with that. How can we make this, what can we factor out from the denominator? Sorry, from the numerator. What can we factor out? Well, we can factor out a 3, but we can also factor out an x. That will be the greatest common factor. So if I factor out this 3x, well, if I factor out 3x from this 3x to the power of 3, I am left with x to the power of 2. And if I factor out a 3x from this 3x squared, I am left with x. And if I factor out a 3x from this -6x, I am left with -2. -2 times 3x is -6, and so on. Now from this one, we have x to the power of 3 plus 2x squared minus 3x. Well, what is the greatest common factor? What is the only thing that I can factor out? Well, the only thing I can factor out is an x. And that leaves me with x squared plus 2x minus 3. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep factoring. Okay, let me use different colors. I'm going to factor this using the x method. So let me work on that first. And again, what I'm trying to do is see if there are any factors that can cancel each other out. So I have -2 here, +1. What are two values that when I multiply them give me -2, but when I add them give me +1? Well, that will be 2 and -1. 2 times -1, -2. 2 plus -1 is +1. So my factors will be 3x times x plus 2 times x minus 1. And that's being divided by, let me change the color. Now let's factor this. So I already have an x on the denominator. Write down x squared plus 2x minus 3. So it will be two numbers that when I multiply them give me -3, but when I add them give me 2. Well, that will be 3 and -1. 3 times -1, -3. 3 minus 1, or 3 plus -1 is 2. So we have x plus 3 and x minus 1. So what are the values? What are the values that will cancel, or the factors that will cancel each other out? Well, notice here that we have an x. This x cancels this x, and this x minus 1 cancels this x minus 1. And we're left with 3 times x plus 2 divided by x plus 3. And now this is in the simplest form. This rational expression is in the simplest form.